So, before I start this video, no, I'm not going to be picking on Captain Marvel today. I done that in the worst Marvel movies, and I did that in the top 3 disappointing movies of 2019. So, any Captain Marvel's fans out there, if you're watching this, you don't have to get angry at me, because today I'm going to leave Captain Marvel alone. But to any of you Marvel fans, you may get a little disappointed and angry and want to beat me with a shovel when I choose 3 of the most popular movies for the top 3 disappointing Marvel movies of all time. So, just keep that in mind. Try to respect my opinion, and hopefully we can all enjoy the future Marvel movies for what they are. And a lot of us are going to disagree with each other. We'll like certain things. We'll like certain Marvel movies, and we'll dislike certain Marvel movies. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the countdown. And just keep in mind, this video is going to contain spoilers, so if you've not seen any of these 3 movies, then stop the video, watch these 3 movies, and then come back. Starting with number 3, Ragnarok. Now, before you start bashing on the screen, let me just say that Thor Ragnarok is objectively not an awful movie. There are some good things about this movie. Like, for one, its visuals. It is visually stunning in every way. Also, a lot of, some jokes did land, and it was funny for some scenes, but I just find Thor Ragnarok to be a disappointment. Not only because this was one of the most anticipated movies in my library. Like, out of all the Thor movies, this looked like it would be the most fun, the most interesting, and the most energetic. I personally find this to be one of the most overrated Marvel movies. Not because it's very different from the other Thor movies. That is kind of distracting how it's very different from the other Thor movies. And I will say it is better than the second Thor movie, but it's not as good as the first Thor movie. What really gets me is how funny it thinks it is. It thinks that it's this great comedy that, like, if they just make Thor funny, then that fixes all the problems of Thor. This movie relies heavily on its comedy. The climax, I'll admit, there was this one cool scene where Thor bursts out into lightning and totally kicks the butt of Hela's skeleton army. But other than that, Thor Ragnarok is a very disappointing movie. Also, just like Captain Marvel, this feels like it should be in the Star Wars universe, not in the Marvel universe. Jeff Goldblum did a killer performance as the Grandmaster, I'll give him that. This is the least worst out of these disappointing movies. Thor Ragnarok, while it is disappointing because it could have been better, it does have a lot of good things. This is probably the least disappointing out of the 3, because at least it gave us some enjoyable entertainment. And the second most disappointing Marvel movie of all time is Avengers: Infinity War. Now, this was one of the most anticipated movies of 2018. I was really looking forward to Avengers: Infinity War. I thought it would be better than Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought this would be like a game changer for the MCU. And for a lot of people it was. But I was disappointed because it doesn't really have a straight focus. I mean, I guess it does have a straight focus with Thanos trying to get all the stones and wipe out half the universe. But it has too much stuff going on. Like, one hand you focus on the Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor, then it's over to Thor and his mission to get a new hammer, and then it's Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and then it's the team Captain America, Black Widow, War Machine, Falcon, and finally it's in Wakanda with King T'Challa and them trying to get the stone out of Vision. You see my point? There's way too much going on in this movie, and it's very distracting. And honestly, I found it very underwhelming. It was very boring, and it was really disappointing that it wasn't engaging or as emotional or fun as Endgame. This was the first part of Endgame. This should have been a milestone for the movie industry. This should have been a smash, it should have been an explosion of creativity and fun. And there are some good things like Thor Ragnarok about it that I will give it credit for, like the visuals. The visuals are not bad at all. They were probably the best part of the movie. And Josh Brolin does do a killer performance as Thanos. The characters aren't necessarily bad, they're just, a lot of them don't get enough development. I personally feel that T'Challa didn't get enough development. He was pretty well developed in Black Panther, but some characters like Iron Man barely show up in the film. That's mostly taken up by the Guardians and Captain America and his team. Iron Man shows up for like the beginning scene and the ending scene, like when they're about to fight Thanos on Titan. So the problem with this movie is it doesn't develop all of its characters. It has to balance way too many subplots, way too many characters. Bringing them all together was a great achievement for something like Marvel, because this had never been done before. Nothing like this has ever been achieved in cinema history. Nobody has ever tried to cross over this many characters into one feature film. And they did do a good job at doing that. They managed to fit all of them together into one film, although they had to cut some characters out like Ant-Man and Hawkeye. So they did well in the aspect of crossing all these characters over, but it just feels overwhelming when there's so many characters, so many subplots, and it just took away the enjoyment for me. I personally would have liked it a little bit more if they just focused on one set of character for like one full scene, give them a full development. Like maybe one half focus on Tony and his team, one half focus on Guardians of the Galaxy, one half focus on Steve and his team. Kind of like that. Avengers Infinity War, for me, was one of the most disappointing movies of 2018, and it's certainly one of the most overrated movies in Marvel's library. And by far, the #1 most disappointing Marvel movie of all time is Spider-Man: Homecoming. Back in 2002, I would watch the first two Raimi films constantly. Spider-Man was my favorite hero. I loved Spider-Man growing up. It was very nostalgic to me. It was one of my favorite childhood movies, right next to Shrek, Monsters, Inc., Toy Story, and A Bug's Life. So, out of all these movies, this is the one I was most excited for, because it was a new Spider-Man movie after the dreadful duology starred Andrew Garfield and directed by Mark Webb. Of course, I was like a lot of other people. Those last two films almost made me done with Spider-Man. But I had hope for this movie that maybe it could be fun, and just maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be as good as the first two Raimi films, but at least it could have been exciting, fun, epic, big. But sadly, I was let down. This film takes a lot of turns. Like, this film literally pulled a Spider-Man 3. I'm not even joking. This film doesn't feel straight. It takes too many steps. Like, he doesn't get the love interest. He doesn't get to become an Avenger until an Infinity War. So what was the whole point of him deciding not to be an Avenger? Just so they could totally nick on that on the next movie that he's in. I'm sorry if I'm not coming out clear. I apologize for the way I'm talking in this video. I'm not as energetic as I am in the other videos, but I will do a review on each of these films and go into more detail, so I'm sorry about that. But the main problem with Spider-Man Homecoming is it doesn't feel big. It feels more like a high school movie rather than a superhero movie. And I get it, Spider-Man Homecoming. It's in the title, so of course it's going to have more to do with high school. But it is still supposed to be a Spider-Man movie. It's still supposed to be epic and big. It's supposed to have... And of course the villain is menacing, I'll give credit. But he's a little too menacing. I mean, Debris, he literally causes a building to crumble down upon Peter. That is too much. The climax, I feel like the climax could have been better. Tom Holland is good as Spider-Man, but it feels kind of boring because he can't really swing from buildings yet. He has to stay on the ground. He doesn't really... he's not really in the city that much throughout this movie. He's more in a suburban area. If he swings from anything, it's either from trees or a house. This movie, it could have been good. It could have been one of the best Marvel movies, and some people really love this movie. They think that it's the best Spider-Man movie. Some people actually go as far as to say this is the best movie in the entire MCU. But for me, being a fan of this character and of this hero, absolutely adoring Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movies, I have to say this is the most disappointing movie I have ever seen from Marvel. By far. It's more disappointing than Avengers Endgame. I mean, Infinity War. Avengers Endgame lived up to the hype. But even if this movie was disappointing, at least they made up for it by making the sequel one of the best Marvel movies of all time. Even if it meant enduring a pretty dull Spider-Man movie first. Another problem too. This movie's way too cruel and harsh to Peter. Tony is possibly the best thing about this movie. The fact that they included Iron Man in this movie was pretty cool. So, I'll give it that. But overall, for me, this is the most disappointing. Now, I'm not the end-all be-all opinion when it comes to these three movies. If you love them, that is totally fine. I'm not going to tell you not to go see them. And, well, when I say go see them, I mean watch them on DVD. They're not in theaters anymore. And if they are, they're not showing in theaters anywhere near here. But I'm not going to discourage you from watching them. If you want to watch these movies, that is totally fine. I totally get your opinion if you adore these movies and cherish them as the greatest Marvel movies of all time. But for me, I just thought that they were disappointing. See you guys later. May Jesus bless you.